Yay.
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
Is that her? Okay.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi,
I love the blue, by the way. I love it.
Thank you so much. Please,
gorgeous.
for people who can turn on their cameras, please do. You know, this is LOLA JAYE. So it's so interesting that I have been following Lola for a couple of years.
Yeah, I
on
it.
Instagram. And I think she follows me too.
And I do.
Yes, I think last year I just said, wait, we've never really had any of her books on our book club. So you know, how you follow people, you just feel you know them. And I reached out to her and I was sick. Thank you. You see this book, eh? Deep, deep, deep. So this is the Ottawa Black Book Club. I am the founder and the host, supported by the amazing Alice and Ria. We meet, our focus is only on books by authors of African and Black descent. And our goal is to decolonize our melanate bookshelves by discussing African, books, Black books, one book at a time. Alice, please go ahead, read Lola's short bio before we start.
With pleasure. First and foremost, Lola, thank you very much for joining our club.
Thank you.
It's always a pleasure to be able to meet not in person, but virtually at least, because we wish you were here with us, but it's still always better than nothing. And thank you very much for the time that you do take to discuss with us. Your book has been touching us, and we are very happy to have you. So Lola JAYE is an author, registered psychologist, psychotherapist, sorry, not the same thing, and speaker who has penned 6 novel and self-help books. She was born and raised in London, England, has lived in Nigeria in the United States. She has written for CNN, Essence, HuffPost, and the BBC. The Ethic Child is her first epic historical novel, which we have appreciated and was our book this month. Thank you very much again, Lola, for joining us. And I know that I'm not the only one who have questions, so I'm just gonna let everybody else ask questions, and I will come back later on.
Okay.
So welcome, Lola. Thank you so much for this book. Thank you for giving us the opportunity, to go on this journey with Dikembe. Thank you also as a history junkie, for making me ask questions, because I realized that, like I was telling them at the beginning, people say Adolf Hitler is one of the most sadistic people that ever lived. Nobody talks about, and that's because the people he killed were white people, Jews. Nobody talks about the atrocities of the Belgian Congo, because King Leopold was killing Black people. We've talked about slavery, we've talked about colonization, but and the effects of colonialism. But you see, companions, when I saw this, I had to go Google it. I said, what the hell is this? I've seen photos with these little boys, but it's never crossed my mind. You know how you just look at it and you just pass it? Yeah. So what was your inspiration for, writing this book? Tell us about you and your inspiration for writing this book.
Well, my inspiration, all my books are usually based around a child being displaced. And I think that's always been a thing for me, because I've moved around so much as a child, it kind of resonates with me. But this particular story, because I've never written about a real person before, they've always been fictional. So I went to, I was living in America for a while, came back to England. I was feeling a bit displaced at that point, even though I was a fully fledged adult. And my friend said, oh, come along to this exhibition at the art gallery, a very famous art gallery in London. And they're doing a special exhibition about Black people in the Victorian era. That's not something you hear every day in England. If I read about people in America in the Victorian era, then yeah, I see that. You see Reconstruction, you see, post-slavery, there's Black people, there's portraits of Black people. Some were doing pretty well as well. In England, you never hear that. So I was really, really excited about going along to that. So I went along. There was a very few photos. There wasn't many. How these photos became in existence, because they'd actually been hidden away for 100 years and someone had discovered them. So it was fascinating. So they had a choir from South Africa that came over. Queen Victoria invited them over, these beautiful photos, and they could have been taken today. And then there was this picture of this little boy, and I just couldn't get my eyes off him. And this was Dugu Mahali, the inspiration for the book. And I looked at him, and it was just a picture of him, and I thought, there's a black boy, dark skin, in England, wearing supposedly, British nice clothing, because anything that's seen as nice clothing here is anything that's not African, basically. So that's anything African is negative. So he was wearing a shirt and trousers, and I thought, this is really strange. But there was something about his eyes, and they kept following me. I know when we look at portraits, eyes do follow you around anyway, but this was different. There was something that he was speaking to me, and I couldn't really articulate it. So I said to my friend, you know what, I'm actually going to write about this child. I'm going to go home, I'm going to research him, and one day I'm going to write a book about him. And she's like, yeah, all right. And so I went home, we did a little bit of research, and I found out that he had died at 12. I was like, oh, okay, well, there's nothing really to see here, is there? And then I asked myself, he died at 12 prematurely through no thought of his own. What could he have been if he'd been allowed to live? That's what the question I asked myself. And I just started from that angle.
And I also like the way you started. You said, until the lions have their own historians, the history of the hunt will always glorify the hunter.
Absolutely. Yeah. Chinua Achebe's quote, exactly, because every time we hear about Black history, historically, it's been from the point of the white person, the colonizer. But the person who's being colonized, who's being brutalized, it's never their voice. And so it's about time. And slowly but surely it's happening. In Chinua Achebe's time, he was one of a few. There are not many, but now there are so much more, and we need more voices from us because we will tell a different perspective.
Yeah, very true. So, because for the longest time, the stories we've had about Black people is usually the colonized version, where indigenous Black people and other indigenous populations are made to look like savages.
Yes.
Yes, I told them, I used the story of Tarzan. We all grew up. Yes, Tarzan, who grew up on the African continent. If all the indigenous Africans were savages, he was also supposed to be a savage. But yes, Tarzan turned out to be this hero, and then all the other indigenous tribes he encounters in all his movies are usually savages.
Yes, exactly. And I grew up on that. I grew up on that diet, we are savages and the white person is the savior, is the good one. And that's why with the book, I really wanted to be careful, because I knew I wanted to have a white person in it, one that is sympathetic with the girl child, but the one who's not sympathetic, Sir Richard Babington, I wanted him to have more than one layer. Because on one hand, did he think he was doing a good thing? Did he have the white savior complex? How did he see this child? I don't personally like him, but I wanted to write him in a way where he's not a caricature. We know that Leopold is an evil being, so that was easy. But with him, I wanted to show different sides to him, where he thought he was doing good. But this is the thing, we don't need your help. If you'd left us alone, we wouldn't need you to come and quote unquote help us. So that's always forgotten. The initial destruction is caused by the colonizer. So when they then come back and say that we're going to help you, you're kind of missing the point.
Yeah.
And that's the bit.
Yeah, because what the hell are you helping with? You're just there to rape.
You caused the destruction in the first place. You're actually mopping up your own mess. So if you'd left us alone, would have been fine. Would have been really fine.
Yeah. And a question I had at the back of my mind when I thought of this companionship, was it ever sexual? Because I feel, yes, because I had that, because when I was reading, there are subtle nuances here and there, because I was very uncomfortable when I read, because I read it out. Let me see, I think I marked it. When he was the boys.
Just to know, has everyone read the whole book? We don't want to give too many spoilers. Has everyone read everything?
It's fine. No, you can go ahead and give spoilers. I read everything.
I've read it twice.
Oh, wonderful.
So who hasn't read it? Your luck. Go read it. Yeah, we'll give you all the spoilers that you need. Go read it. Yeah, you had a month to read the book. I was very uncomfortable when when Monty and Laura found, I think there were pages from Richard's diaries or diary or
Yes,
something.
yes,
Oh,
yes.
that was my question. What companionship, for the love of God? You have women to keep you company, but a young African boy, okay, fine, tokenism, possession, property. I feel that some of these relationships were sexual. Because when I did my research, I think I read that some people had gone on to write books about homosexuality and stuff like that. So in your research, did you come across anything like that? Because I like that you did, because for me, I would have just been traumatized. If you had gone into him molesting Dikembe, I would have been traumatized. But I was very uncomfortable in in some of the pages. Like when he asked him to come into the room and he was drunk. And he was talking about not being able to satisfy some woman. Why should you be telling an 11-year-old? And in the course of the story, many times I couldn't figure out his age. Like when Richard died, I couldn't really figure out his age. Then with the things Agatha was asking him to do, cook, clean, then I think I realized he was just between the ages of 11 and 14?
Yeah.
And I was like, but this is a child. How do you take a child that has been sleeping in a bed and throw him in the attic and then lock him there?
This is when later on in the book, yeah?
On the book, but
yeah.
I'm starting from the beginning of the book. Okay, so let me start from the beginning of the book. What his brother and father, I couldn't figure out what they were doing for the white men.
That's the thing. I left that ambiguous on purpose. I know from my research what was going on in the Congo at that time. Okay. At that point, it was towards the end, and there was only a few villages where they hadn't gone into it fully, and so that was one of the villages. So basically, they were gaining in on them. So the mother knew this. She wanted to get her boy out. So what the father and the brothers were doing, they were almost human carriages. What they used to have is almost human carriages carrying everything, portering stuff, and they would get beaten. So the whole rubber aspect of it was in another region of the Congo where they had a rubber quota. I did a lot of research, and it was quite traumatic as well, what they used to do to them. But in this particular part of the Congo, it was a bit different. So yeah, they were portering and they were just doing whatever they wanted for them, basically, at this point. She saw that happening. There were rumors that they were gaining in even more. So she wanted her son out. Okay. The father was a staunch opposition, as you could tell, and he paid the price for that. So they weren't going to just sit down and just take it. And she wasn't going to let her last boy succumb to that, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I was wondering. Okay, sorry.
I wanted to pedal back for your original question.
Okay, please go ahead.
About the molestation. See, I toyed with that because I based this story obviously on Ndugu Mahali, who was brought here by a man called Stanley. This explorer called Stanley, his statue is still erect. It's still there in Wales. They had a vote whether to pull it down during the whole 2020 situation, and they voted to keep his statue up, which I'm quite disgusted with. So he's there proudly as a hero as we speak in Wales, which is not far from here. And so I dug obviously into his past and his thinkings. He actually wrote a book, and the book talks about his love for a Black slave. And the Black slave is very young. So I contacted his autobiographer and I said, look, this looks a bit iffy here. Do you want to say something about that? And he said, oh, no, it wasn't about him. It was about somebody else. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. And I asked him, what do you know about Ndugu Mahali? And this is what really got me. As usual, the hunter is glorified. This autobiographer said to me, oh, I don't really know much about him. But you write about Stanley, but you don't know much about this beautiful little boy. And that really angered me. So with the idea about him molesting the child, I toyed about putting it in the story, but I thought that was too obvious. He was drinking heavily, so maybe he was drinking to mask maybe his guilt about what he'd done or his feelings, but I thought it was too obvious. The abuse does happen, but it's at an unlikely source. I wanted it to be a woman because women are not seen as sexual abusers. And I wanted it to be someone different. And I wanted it to be very, very subtle that you did not know. You were kind of like, really? So yeah, in the original, I'm gonna say yes. That's just my feeling. I'm going to say yes. But if for the case of this story, I decided not to put it in there.
Yeah, because, when I read that, I had to go back again. I had to go back and read it again to say, okay, what just happened here? But again, I put two and two together. The actions leading to that, the acts. Her in the bathroom, before the bathroom, her asking him to come help zip up her dress, then her in the bathroom and asking him to come in, and then before the act happened. And I was wondering, okay, I would have thought that this would have happened with Richard.
No, it's too obvious. I think it's too obvious. I think we don't, obviously I'm a therapist and I've worked in mental health for many years. Women do sexually abuse. It's a thing. More men do it. Most definitely more men do it. But I just think for the sake of the book, I didn't want to be too obvious. With Sir Richard, his sin was bringing this child over.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to do the whole molesting thing as well. That I wanted to focus on him being this, oh, am I a white savior? Am I this? And I kind of didn't want to put too much on that character. And again, it's too obvious. I love it when the reader really thinks about it, because the jury's still out. Maybe he did have feelings towards him. I don't know. The jury's still out. With the abuse with the woman, I wanted to really show Dikembe's point of view, the victim's point of view, because he was confused. He was a child. He's never really seen himself as a sexual being, but this white woman saw this child as a sexualized beast. And that's how, adultification of children, it happens today, adultification of children, of Black children. They're not seen as children. And we had a case here recently, I know it happens in America a lot, I know you're not in America, but in England, we had a case recently where a 13-year-old girl, 14-year-old girl was strip searched without her parents there, because they thought she had marijuana on her. She didn't, that's not the point. And this was in school. The teachers allowed this child to be strip searched. They don't see her as a child. She's an adult, she's a beast, a Black beast. It's here, it's psychological, it's there. That would not have happened to a white child. It just wouldn't have.
Never.
So then with this story, with the woman, she sees him as this predatory Black man and almost fetishizes him. And we know from slavery that would have happened, the Black buck, ready for sex. And obviously it happened to women as well. So that's where that was about. I didn't want it to be too much about her. I wanted it to be about him, his confusion. He felt dirty. And I don't think there's enough said about men, or boys, men feeling dirty. I heard an interview where this guy was asked on a radio show, when did you lose your virginity? He said, oh, I was 13. Who did you lose it to? 2 women of 19. And they all laughed. I said, oh, high five, brother. And I'm like, hold on. He's been sexually molested by 2 women at 13 and they're high-fiving him. So if that was a woman saying that, it'd be different. It'd be a different story. So I kind of wanted to bring that, highlight it. This child, he did feel the feelings associated with that. He was not high-fiving anybody. This hurt him.
Thank you so much. Alice, I'm going to, Alice, please, you have a question?
Yes, it was actually in regards of what Lola was discussing about. So I wanted to ask her with her experience in regards of molestation. So you mentioned him being a young kid and him not really understanding what was happening. And then you also talked about your experience and how, I'm not gonna lie, when I was reading the book, I was like, oh, it's true. This is not a subject that we talk about a lot. So we know that in Black families, when those type of things happens, and you see, even I have that tendency of saying those type of things when molestation or abuse or sexual abuse are happening, a lot of time it's a hush-hush subject. It's a taboo subject. We don't want to talk about it. So do you feel like it is, and I know maybe we kind of going away a little bit from the book, but do you feel that it's the fact that we don't talk so much about women being the abusers? Is it because it's not reported enough? Because a lot of times, as you mentioned yourself, Black men are supposed to be the strong, bulk,
There you go.
non-emotional individuals
Yes.
who cannot be hurt by anything. So for them to actually open up and say, I have been abused, becomes a whole different subject as well. So is it, for you, is it the
Absolutely.
fact that it's not appropriately reported, or is it just because it's a taboo subject and people just refuse to admit that women could also be abusers?
A bit of everything. I think you really answered the question perfectly there when you described how, and we're talking about Black men here, so we're going to single it out to them, how they're supposed to be seen, you know, strong, you know, manly. That word manly, you know, what the hell does that mean? Does that mean that you can't be vulnerable? Does that mean that you can't, you know? So yeah, that's part of it as well. Also in our community, we don't talk about it. So then on a third thing, even as a wider aspect, you know, we know that rape is very underreported because women are not believed anyway. So if women are not believed, a man has all those other things to deal with as well. The fact that, oh, that's not very manly. You know, men are supposed to be the aggressors. Well, what's wrong with you? But also, they're not going to report it. So I think it's a mixture of everything, really, in that sense, for sure. And we're talking about, you know, my book is set in Edwardian times, so 1900 and, you know, 3, 4, 5. Forget about it then. That's not going to happen. So he's really, really confused about what's happened. And obviously there's the fact, obviously I know we're moving a little bit away from the book, but not that much. But obviously his arousal, he's confused by his arousal. And we know that can just be a chemical thing. Doesn't mean you want it, it's a chemical reaction, but he's ashamed at that. So even when he's older, later on in the book, he refuses to go there. And he will take that secret to the grave of he does not want to talk about that. And that's his right.
Yeah. You know, when you talk about this, I think I'm just going to wrap this up with molestation so we can just go into the story. In regards to women molesters not being reported, I have a lot of guy friends. I grew up with a lot of boys as friends, and I realized that their first sexual experience is usually with the maid or an older female relative.
Absolutely.
Yeah, someone said to me that the reason why it is not, many of them don't see it as molestation is because, you know, when it took place, it didn't hurt. Yeah, that's what someone said. That, you know, for a girl, the reason why it's seen as molestation is because it hurts when it takes place. But for boys, because, you know, when it took place, there was no pain. And, you know, and they just talk about it. Someone said to me, someone was telling me, to, you know, an acquaintance back in the day was telling me that it was an older cousin his parents had brought to the house to take care of them that was molesting him.
Wow.
And yes, when his parents would go out, she would come with her friends. He was like, what, 9?
Oh gosh.
Yes. And he was just talking about it as if, you know, oh, just one of those things. But I was sitting there saying, oh my God.
Yes.
And
yes.
people don't understand that trauma, even though you suppress it or you don't admit that it's trauma, it's manifested in different ways. Because I was reading the Dikembe story and I was seeing how difficult it was for him to accept love, to show love, to be vulnerable. Yes. How difficult it was for him.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm so glad you connected the dots there.
Yeah.
If I had met if I had met a man like Dikembe, the way he was so emotionally unavailable, bye-bye. And that's why I wanted to bring in Marjorie. You know, I don't like the word strong Black woman. I hate it because it's too many tropes to do with that. But she's an exceptional woman. I wanted her to be an exceptional woman who knew her worth. And she said to him, look, you know, I haven't got time for this. Yeah. You know, we knew why he was like that, but she didn't. And why should she waste her time on this man? So she left and she found a man who did love her and treated her the right way. So yes, he couldn't. He was going out of all these different women, but we knew the reason why. Nowadays, he would have been called an F-boy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yes.
For sure. Sure.
So it just goes to show you that many times when you see people, before we make assumptions, we should look deeper, that there's always a story behind. Yeah.
Absolutely.
People use these things as facades to mask trauma sometimes.
Yeah. But equally, we shouldn't judge. But when it comes to finding a mate, and I'm going back to Marjorie and her, it wasn't her place to cure him. So we're in a place now where there is therapy available. Do the work, mister. I recognize that you are damaged or whatever. I don't like the word damaged, but you are a product of your trauma. Do the work. It's not up to the Black woman to then do the work for him. And that's why with Marjorie, obviously with the absence of therapy and modern day techniques, she walked away. She put herself first, and then she reaped the benefits 10 years later.
10 years later, yeah. You know, it just takes me to African societies. When you marry a man and he's misbehaving, they go, hey, it's the devil. Just keep praying keep praying for him. Be patient and be very tolerant. But when it's the woman who does that, ooh, she's labeled, she's a whore. Bad upbringing, disrespect, and all of that. Okay.
Absolutely.
I'm going to go back to the book to where...
Sometimes when the man is not acting right, you're also blamed for it. Oh, there's something you're not doing right.
Yeah, there's something you're not doing right.
You need to do better. Go back to your mother so she can direct you in the right direction. Something is not right. And once again, I agree with the fact that we need to support our brothers and sisters. But as I always say, I am not there to raise you. That was your mama job. And if that is not done, baby boy, that's not my job. My job is to make sure that the two of us are functional and working together. But I'm not doing your mama job. I'm going to raise my kids. I'm not raising nobody's kids.
Exactly.
You know,
and which is why it was important that, you know, it's almost like, because obviously he's not in a modern day setting, so there's no therapy, there's nothing really available to him. His thing was, I love this woman, you know, and I have to do something. So when they came together again, it was almost like the great timing. And then she got to that point where she was with him. And there's a scene that I really enjoyed writing when he was on the floor and she was on the floor with him, just on the floor with him and his suffering and just holding him. And that was her telling, I'm here for you. So that was important. There had to be an element of Black love, which is really important. But I had to show the struggle that it took to get there, but it wasn't her struggle. She was not having it, but it was his struggle and he got there in the end.
Okay. You know, this is why sometimes I wish we had more men on this, you know, regulars, so we could get their point of view.
It'd be lovely, yeah.
I feel that sometimes as in the society, we are too hard on Black men. The expectation on Black men, you know, is too much. It's okay for a man to cry. For the longest time, I was of that school. See, until our January book talk, I was one of those women who goes, you know what? If you're a crier, don't come my way, please. Shit.
Okay.
Now I'm beginning to understand that, you know what? It's okay to cry. It's okay for a man to cry. It's okay for a man to be vulnerable. We expect too much. He's human too. He has feelings. Yes.
It takes strength. It takes strength to be vulnerable because obviously, you know, if as a Black man, you're supposed to be strong, this thing. For you to go against that and be vulnerable, that's a beautiful thing. And that's what was important with their relationship, that he was able to be that way. With the other women, that he was just using for sex. It's like, all right, have sex, bye. With her, he cried, he was on the floor, he laid down, he told her everything. So she knew about him, warts and all. He didn't have to pretend with her anymore. And that was always going to be the woman that he's going to marry, the woman that he could literally be naked with.
Okay.
He'd be naked with her and she will still want him. Because remember, his mother is gone. So his issues with women are far reaching. You know, one woman abused him, one effectively abandoned him, if you think about it. It wasn't her fault, but she abandoned him.
Okay.
So now he's found this woman that he can be vulnerable with. And it's a big thing.
Yeah, vulnerability is not weakness. Let me see. A man that can be vulnerable and express their feelings is very sexy. Yes.
Very. Very.
I'm a work in progress.
Hey, that's what we all are.
Yeah. So I want to go back to the book. You know, when his mom let him go, I'm looking at the trauma of separation. And then he comes over to England and his name is changed.
Yeah.
You see, as Africans, right? You see, there's something about our names to us. When I introduce myself, even though I'm called Louisa, I always introduce myself as Olunosen Louisa Ivaze. Olunosen is my first name. You know, as Nigerians, somehow we find ourselves using our middle names a lot. Yeah, yes. Olunosen Louisa. Because we believe that when you say a child's name, you speak the meaning of that name into that child's life.
Absolutely.
So because I was just, you know, my interest there was, I was looking at the journey of his name. okay, Dikembe, oh, Celestine. And then when he met Marjorie, okay, yes, he uses Celestine. Celestine is good for business. And
Mhm,
then towards the end, where she asked him, what would you like to be called? What do you
mhm.
prefer? And he said, Dikembe Kabili, in honor of his brother.
Yeah.
What's about, you see, as a psychotherapist, the trauma of separation, mother and child, the power of identity and the power of names.
Mhm. The names are so important, as you said. As a Nigerian, I get it. And I researched those names fully because obviously in the Congo, there are so many tribes. And I wanted to make sure I got it right. I feel that the Congolese people have been wronged so much. There was no way I was going to mess about with this. So absolutely. And the stripping of his name, that scene when he's in school, he goes to school and the horrible headmaster says to him, what is your name? And the first thing he says is Dikembe. No, your name is not Dikembe. You're not from Africa. You are from this Great Britain because we've given you everything. So you owe us. That scene, I wrote it with Roots in mind. There's that scene in Roots when Kunta Kinte, Toby. And I'm just channeling that, that horrible scene. Because once you've stripped a person of their name, you are taking so much more than their name. You're taking their history, their ancestry, their language, their food, their customs, everything. And you are now owning them. And that's what that scene in Roots represents. And that's what that scene in that classroom represents. This horrible teacher, this one Black boy in this class, he's stripping him, And at the end of that scene, he says that, Dikembe's kind of talking to himself and saying that he's quite disgusted with himself because it's very easy now to denounce his name. He's finding it easier every single day. Yeah.
Then the trauma of separation, I saw a mother's love in what Dikembe's mom did for him. She knew that of course she knew she was never going to see her son again, but she was willing to make that sacrifice to give her son what she thought or what she felt was a better life.
Yeah.
Yes, a mother's love. I mean, for mothers, here, I know that mothers, they say when you have a child, that the love you have for that child is different. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I've done quite a few of these book clubs and interviews, and I always get defensive when people say, oh, she shouldn't have done that. Why did she do that? And I said, you know what? By the grace of God, go I. You don't know what you would do in that position. She thought she was doing the best thing for her child. She knew that this was not going to end well, that this child, if he stays, he will become a slave to these people and maybe killed. I mean, her own husband's head was chopped off. So she knew what was at stake here. So she worked with what she had, and that was what she did. So I'm kind of defensive with the mother because you just don't know what you're going to do in that position. We can't judge. She did what she thought was right for her child. And she probably felt that she'd failed all the other boys that she'd had. And she's like, right, this is the last time. I'm not going to lose anymore. One had lost an arm. The others were beaten, husband dead. Let's not do this. So yeah, absolutely. She did what she felt was right. And she was desperate. She was desperate.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Miriam, I remember you said you had some questions for the author. Kahina?
Yes, I was just about to write down the question I had actually. I have two questions. First of all, your book was amazing. It really touched me. It got me very emotional, especially at the end. I was at work and I was about to cry. I was like, oh no. So yes, I have two questions. Why was the book set in the country and not set in London, like within the city? Is it you wanted to have more of the countryside feel of the book?
Oh, okay. The place is fictional that I chose. I did that on purpose because I didn't want to make it a real place because it was a bit fuzzy what part of England he was in anyway. I could have found out, but I think once you start making it a real place, it just then becomes a bit weird because you're dealing with people that are there now. Oh, this didn't happen then, blah, blah, blah. I haven't got time for that. I'm going to research to death the Congolese part of it, but the British part of it, I didn't want to. I wanted to make it my own little fictional town that does not exist called Ranklin. That's why. And also, I wanted it to be in the country because I wanted there to be a sea element. I know we have the Thames here, but it's not the same. I wanted the sea. I wanted this endless body of sea because he could see over the horizon that that's where I came from. My family are somewhere over there. And I wanted that expanse of sea. So it had to be in the country for that reason, for sure. Yeah, so those are the two reasons. I wanted it
That
not to
makes sense.
exist. And then, yeah, I wanted that kind of atmospheric thing. This water carried me here. And if I go in it again, I'll go back. So he's tortured by seeing this water literally in the town he lives.
Okay, wow. And then my second question is, was Malcolm his brother?
Everyone asked me this. Oh my gosh, everyone asked me this. Again, and it has to be you have to decide. You have to decide, because to me, Malcolm represented every Black person that would have been in England at that time. They came, obviously not every Black person in England came from trauma per se, because you had, kings, offshoots of kings and queens going to Oxford and stuff here. But that particular Black person who lives in that area, shoddy area, would have come from that kind of trauma and background. So to me, Malcolm represented every Black person in that dirty area where he found him. Whether it's his brother or not, I leave that to the reader. Personally, I don't think it's his brother. I just feel that he wanted it so badly to be his brother. And maybe you do too, and that's okay. But yeah, I definitely left that to the reader. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to say it's his brother.
No,
Yeah.
because I was thinking about it and I was wondering, when I went Paco, who I expected was, I said, wait, if he was going to meet any of his brothers, why not Kabili? Then I thought, okay, so if Paco had come across the sea, had been taken across the sea, so has the trauma made him suppress his past?
Right.
Then later I remembered, I said, no. Sometimes in life, when we desire certain things so much, remember, you start to dream about those things.
Yes.
You start to dream about those things, and sometimes you feel the universe is talking to you. You know how
Right.
I read a psychology book that defined dreams as a sea of somethingness in an ocean of nothingness.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah, that was how I saw that. Then years later, when he started his which I thought was really cool, his recruitment agency.
Yeah.
And that application had come from Malcolm. I was hopeful. I was saying, okay, this is it. And then he went, it was a bogus address. And I kept wondering, whatever became of Malcolm? Yeah, because initially I thought, okay, Paco, but later I went, no, it could just be just some other Black person. And I think just that trauma, because he lived with trauma, all his life. He was, the longing for his mom, the longing for the homeland, the longing for the soil. It's like, even though as immigrants, I was born in Nigeria, I grew up in Nigeria, and I live in Canada now, but sometimes I still long for the smell of Christmas. Smell of Christmas, look, is different. I miss the smell of rain. I even when I lived in the UK, when I did my postgrad, nope. Here, no. The smell of rain in Nigeria, back home, is very different. Goat meat tastes different.
The eggs taste different.
Tastes different. So you see that trauma. Christine says the village smell. Yes. So I thought of it. I went, that trauma was there. I think it's trauma. I don't think it's his brother. I just think, sometimes I think it's just the heart, the emotion, the thoughts, how we manifest. It's like when you like somebody and the person doesn't even know you like them, and the person just smiles at you. You make out, you go, oh, the person smiled only at me. The person focused on me. Whereas
you want it so much.
Whereas the person was smiling at a tree behind you.
Yes. Yeah, you got it. You got it. That's what I was trying to, okay. For sure.
Miriam, you have your question?
Yes. Hi.
Hi,
Lola. Thank you for your book. It's really brilliant.
Thank you.
So I was gonna ask about Caroline. Who is she? Like, I just could not figure out who she was while reading the book. So I was gonna ask about her. Yeah.
Caroline. So in what context? You mean
if I'm not mistaken, Caroline was Vivian's mother, I think. Yeah, and she was of mixed race. So I was wondering where she came from because her mother was deaf, and then I really couldn't just place who she was.
Right, so she would have been
The child, the child Agatha had for Dikembe.
Oh,
yeah. So she had a child, and she was in a home. She was put in a home.
Yeah.
To be honest, she could actually have a storyline of her own. She could actually have a book of her own because so much happened to her. But obviously, this was Dikembe's story, so I didn't go into detail about that. We know that it's an unfortunate end, and we know that people were put into certain asylums. She's put into asylum through no fault of her own. But yeah, that's a whole different book in itself. Maybe I'll write it one day. I don't know, but yeah.
I was just gonna ask that.
Yeah,
Please do. Yeah, because for me, I was going to ask about that to say the way people with disabilities were treated back in the day. Because, you know, when I was going through, I was waiting to see, okay, and all they just said was she was mute.
Yeah.
Remember Laura was saying to Monty that it would be great to find out about her. So I just went, okay, I just saw them again going on another journey where they tried to find out. Yeah, and you said Caroline, but in my head, I don't know why her name registered as Catherine. Yeah,
right,
I thought of her as a Catherine, not a Caroline, as a Catherine.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I thought about it. I went, okay, as racist as Agatha was, as mean as she was, I was surprised that she paid compensation. The £200, the £200 she gave to the lawyer, that was Mr. Richard's friend.
Yeah.
But when Dikembe left, escaped, I think I still missed that part of how he left. I don't know if he walked away from the house, but all I just remembered with the story was I know Dikembe left and he went to that lawyer. And I was asking, why didn't the lawyer ever come looking for him after Richard died to find out what was going on with him? Why?
That was definitely his sin. Just didn't care enough. And I know, and he felt really guilty about it, which is why he fought hard to get what he did. But also, you brought up a really good point about her giving that money away. Remember, they were having conception problems. She wanted to have children, and maybe she'd already got what she wanted. She's like, give them money, let him go away. Because her husband, remember that they wanted to have a child. He makes a reference to that, not being able to have a child, and now she's with child. So who knows? But also, the lawyer is guilty. He feels it. So that, coupled with the fact that maybe she's got what she wanted, made it easier to get that £200. And in those days, £200 was a lot of money. A lot of money.
I was happy that Dikembe left before she had the baby, because if you look at the history of slavery, when white women, when babies were fathered by Black fathers, the women just lied and say, oh, they were raped. And
yes,
she could have easily said Dikembe raped her, even though he was just a child. And they will believe, because remember the story of Emmett Till? He was what, 11?
Okay.
And whistled at a white woman. And when I watched the movie, I felt so bad because this lady lied, and to think that she's still alive and has her name somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah, she could have easily lied that Dikembe raped her.
Exactly. And if you remember the letter that the husband sent, he alluded to that in the letter, that she's pregnant with a child and he took advantage of her. Yeah, he took advantage. You know what he took advantage means?
Yeah, because I was thinking, I thought of that too. And I was just saying to myself, thank God Dikembe escaped before that child was born. And then the child was mute. And then that girl got pregnant by an unknown, for someone.
Another molester, another predator. Yeah.
Yes, she got pregnant and then she was put away. Because I know that happened a lot to people.
A lot. Yeah.
Because again, her disability could just be that she was mute. She could have been okay in every other way. But just for that mere fact that she couldn't speak, she was already labeled as abnormal.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Then I want to come to Richard Babington. Like a lot of white people with that white savior mentality. Because he felt that what he was doing was right.
Yes.
And he was a hopeless drunk.
Yes, he was. He definitely was.
And then the dinners, like that dinner, the first dinner they had where they dressed Dikembe up and said it was in honor of him or so.
Yes.
Well, this lady I wanted to slap.
Daphne.
That just kept talking nonsense.
Yeah.
You know, and in my mind, I was wondering, how do you say such horrible things? But I was happy that, you know, sometimes Dikembe would speak in defense, and
Yeah.
they'll be taken aback. Because after Dikembe left, when he worked at that, when he worked for that white man who was paying him, who he found out was paying the black people less than the white people, the people that almost beat him to death.
Yes.
It was mentioned that he was described around as the one that speaks well.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So, yeah. So what is it with these people and feeling that they are trying to save us from savagery? They are the savages. They are the ones perpetrating evil.
Absolutely. And, you know, that dinner party was funny enough, one of my favorite scenes to write, because it was steeped in so much just truth of what was happening around that time. So around that time, it was understood scientifically, because science was very much relied on, which is fine, scientifically, that Black people were more close to the ape family, so primates. That was a scientific fact. And we were savages, and could not be civilized in any way. So if you do manage to civilize, your mic is off, by the way. If you do manage to civilize, then that is a fluke. So this was very much respected scientific thinking. So at that dinner table, these are all learned people, and this is what they believe. And suddenly this Black person's there who they only know from these science books and what's widely believed. And so, yeah, that conversation, I'm sure, went on in many, many households, whether there was Black people there or not. That was the belief. And also during that time, in the Bronx Zoo, we had Otabenga, a young Congolese man who was displayed with monkeys, and that was okay to do that. That was acceptable. So this is the context that they're saying all this stuff. Yes, nowadays it would be unthinkable, but then it was normal, it was fine. It was literally the same as saying the sky is blue. This is it, you know?
Yeah.
And that's why it was really important.
Yeah, human zoos, because Otabenga, I had read about Otabenga years ago. And I remember that he was also described as a cannibal.
Yeah.
Because of the way his teeth. But it was a traditional practice, I think a coming of age practice where they have their teeth.
It
back.
is. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So for them, it was okay to have humans in a human zoo. Because I remember the First Nations people, that were called the Red Indians, I think the Flatfoot Indians, the last of that race were kept in a human zoo, and that was where they passed away. How do you keep human beings in a human zoo for other people to come and take a look at?
It's very easy, because if you view that human being as not human, as beastly, as we spoke about before, it's very easy. And if you view a child as not a child, as this manly beast, it's very easy. And we have that way of thinking even now. I always remember when Mike Brown was shot, you know, before the Black Lives Matter protests, and he was shot. And I remember them interviewing the cop that did it. And he said, oh, he was, I mean, this is not verbatim, but it was like something about his eyes were like like a beast. Whatever. This is a child. He wasn't 18 yet, but the way he was describing him, because he was tall, he's just like threat. So this hasn't gone away, this way of looking at children as threats, as beastly. So if you see them as a threat, then they need to be caged up. It's then easy. Yeah, they need to be caged up. It's okay. It's not the same as the child in my house, my blonde hair, blue-eyed child. No, this is not the same. Even though they're the same age, they're not the same. They're primates, you know, they can't be civilized. So we're probably doing them a favor by locking them up. So it's easier. You then allow yourself to remove yourself from the humanity, because they're not humans.
But you know, if you know what you've said now, I'm thinking about, you know, society and how society causes us to view races. I did my postgrad in the UK and I lived at Finsbury Park. So I remember
Finsbury Park.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Funny.
Yeah, I lived at Finsbury Park, not too far from the park, Gillespie Road. So that's where
Gillespie Road, yes, I know.
Yeah. So I lived there. So I went to see a friend at Gants Hill, Ilford.
Yeah.
And I remember that night I went out and I came back. I was coming back around, I think 11, you know, close to midnight. And I was walking down. So I learned to be scared of teenagers when I came abroad. In Nigeria, I really don't care. You pass, they'll greet you, good afternoon, ma.
Yeah.
But yeah. walking down, I saw a group of boys. Now, if they were black boys, when I see, in fact, in the UK, that's what I used to do. If there are black boys gathered there, I cross to the other side.
Mhm.
If they are white boys, I cross to the other side.
Mhm.
But if they're Indians, nah, I don't mind. If they're Chinese boys, I don't mind. And a friend of mine said, but haven't you noticed that you don't find Chinese boys just hanging around aimlessly? Most of the time, they're working in shops, they are studying, or they're at home, or they're in school. Indian boys, maybe the British Indian boys, but most of the time, they're just sitting there chatting. But if it's black boys or white boys, there's a tendency for them to constitute a nuisance or harm you or cat calls. So yeah, so that's what this society has done to me. Made me wary of teenagers. Yes, because when I just looked, I noticed they were Indian boys. So all I just did, all the same, I crossed to the other side, and I just went, you know what, they're not going to bother you. But if it were black, if those boys were black boys, cat calls. If they were white boys, I might have gotten attacked. So that is one thing I've noticed with living in the West for me. I'm wary of what they call it, of teenagers, and depending on their race. I mean, I can't picture Chinese boys coming attacking you. They have better things to do with their lives and their time.
But the media portrays, I guess, Asian Americans or Asians differently in that sense, and it's even problematic as well, because you don't see Asians as an Asian man as sexual on TV. They're portrayed as very non-sexual. Okay. So in a way, it's problematic in a different way, you know. So we all have our stereotypes, right? And the way it's portrayed, it does seep in other ways, and it could become dangerous. At least you included the white boys with that. There are people that would say, if I saw black boys or white boys, I'm safe with the white boys. That's where it's problematic.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah, that's the norm. Yeah, that's the norm for sure. Being afraid of teenagers is different, but being afraid of a certain race over another, yeah, it's usually the black kids that will get that for sure.
Okay. And unfortunately, sometimes even us as individuals, we tend to think that way, because Louisa just mentioned that how when she came into the Western countries, for me, it was the reverse. I grew up in US and then I went back to Africa. Okay. So coming from the US and growing in Baltimore, which is not the city as that is known to be the calmest and the most peaceful and the pinky one, I left US knowing that the world was not going to be kind to me from the get-go. Yeah. And my parents thinking, oh, we need to offer our kids opportunities. My dad had, at that particular time, I have actually taken that name out of my papers officially, but he had named me Kimberly. Right. When you say Kimberly, you expect a little blonde, blue-eyed girl. So in kindergarten, they will be like, Kimberly, and I would say, yes, ma'am. And they will look at me and they say, not you, sweetheart. And I was like, what? So at 18, it was the first thing that I did. I told my dad, I'll say, listen, with all due respect, I understand why you gave me the name. I understand why it was important for you, and understand where you were going with it. But with all due respect, that name is going to go off my birth certificate, my passport, that name doesn't exist for me anymore. And I don't even refer to it exceptionally sometimes when I'm giving this example, or anytime that we have a conversation in regards of Christian names and colonial names and things like that. I think Alice fits me well because of my personality. I'm a joyful person. I love I love dreaming, daydreaming. I'm okay with Alice because in my native language, Alice exists as well. So I'm fine with that. And I felt that it was fitting my personality. However, Kimberly for me was a traumatic name because for many, many, many years, I had people coming to me and say, are you seriously called Kimberly? And I say, yes, it's a name. And they were like, what were your parents thinking? Oh, wow. And I got that from grown women. And I was a kid. And I asked them, what do you mean? Well, what were they thinking? Kimberly doesn't fit with a Black woman. or
Yeah.
a Black girl. And this is something that is happening when I'm 8, 9 years old.
Yeah.
So from that moment, I knew that the world was not going to be, and even younger than that, I knew that the world was not going to be kind to me. I knew, and I happened to be growing up in a neighborhood where there was a very few African individuals, because my dad was studying at Johns Hopkins. So it was a neighborhood very, very, sorry to say it, but it was a white neighborhood. And there were very few of us as Black people. Then my parents said, you know what, let's go back to Africa. Went back to Africa. Get there. I'm so used to being the one that people aggress. I'm so being used to people being so nasty and saying nasty things to me that when people start being nice and kind to me, I became the one who was nasty to them, because I was like, okay, what are you trying to do? What are you looking for? Why are you so nice to me? And then around my teenage years, I discovered the whole aspect of African people always taking sides for white people. Like, instead of defending me, I happen also to come from a country, unfortunately, my parents are originally from Rwanda, not unfortunately, I mean, I'm very proud to be Rwandese, but what I mean is that, unfortunately, in 1994, we also have been known for the genocide. Yes. So a lot of times, I went through that, and then I was like, okay, you know what? I'm done. I'm happy. Now I'm in Africa. People have a certain understanding. They've been kind to me. And then the genocide happened. I'm in the middle of my teenage years. I'm already looking and searching for myself. I don't know exactly where I fit, because I'm going to white schools, but I'm living on an African continent, a Black continent. Yeah. And then I speak several languages. Not all my cousins and everybody have the same opportunities. And then you are facing all of that. And then you are faced with people saying, oh, so you are, what are you? Tutu or Hutu? Or are you the ones that are killing people? And I'm like, when do we get to be the human being? And then,
good question.
And then after that, I'm also being judged by my African peers.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you get to a point where you're like, okay, when do I fit in this world? When do I become a human? Why do I have to always be? I'm a woman, so that is already not a good point for me. Born a girl, African, Black, and I mean dark, like proud dark. So you add all of those things and you're like, okay, when do I fit into this world? And how do I fit? Because though I have studied, because a lot of times in Africa, they tell you, with your education, it's going to resolve your issues.
No.
So reading your book was one of the eye opener, because you talked about, and I think earlier you touched on it also, as a grown 24 years old, I had a whole different issue with my identity, because I didn't know who I was.
Yeah.
And I loved your book because of that, because I think that's the type, and I know a lot of people who grew up the same way as me, because they were exposed to so many cultures and so many, because the world has become a very small village. We travel, we get exposed to different things.
Of course.
So thank you very much for your book, because I think that is a great conversation starter. I asked my mom to read the book, because I sometimes struggle explaining to her how it is difficult for me to be all of those things. A woman, Rwandese, born and raised by a Rwandese woman, living in a Western country, and have to integrate and fit into the boxes that I'm supposed to be fitting in as a professional, as a mother, as so on and so on. So just wanted to say that, yeah, it was thank you very much for the book, basically.
Thank you. And thank you for pointing out that part about his identity, because that's another source of shame for him, is that he doesn't know his tribe, he doesn't know his language. And there's that scene where he's watching Muhammad Ali come to, the Congo, and he's thinking, it's my family in the audience, are they there? He just doesn't know. And that is a source of shame for him that he has to live with. He doesn't know who he is. And even in England, he's a Black man, but he speaks well. So he's an anomaly there as well. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, thank you so much. Because I'm trying to work with time, but look, Lola, we need to keep you on for a few more minutes, please. I beg.
Okay, no problem.
I beg. Yeah, because Alice, I was just thinking about your name, and I'm just wondering, would they have preferred if you were called Shanquisha, Daniqua? Yeah.
Yeah, some of them were like, well, I was expecting you to be called Mercedes, Benz.
Yeah,
I'm like,
it
no,
doesn't-
I'm not a car.
Yeah, because some of all these ghetto names, and you know, like when you come to the West and you're trying to find jobs, you know, HR people, it's easy to throw away CVs. Oh, Shaniqua Black. This other one Black. So you have some people trying to make their name sound as English. My friend's name is Egosa. He goes by Edward now. And I'm wondering, Edward, you know, from where? I worked at, as a student, I worked at William Hill, just not too far, just the one in Finsbury Park there. And I remember walking into the store one day and the lady said, oh, when I saw Louisa, I expected to see an Italian. Oh, really? It's a Catholic name too. Oh, really? Okay. Laide. Okay, so Laide, will you ask your question? Then we're going to go to Laura. I want to talk about Laura. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a bit too dark, but yeah. So Laide, please.
What was too dark?
I don't know. I was just like, her character, I don't know, mixed feelings. I just felt she was too unhappy. So Laide, Lola, we've lost you.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah,
hello, Miss Lola. My daughter
Hello.
walked past and she said you sounded like Gina Yasheri.
Oh,
I love her. I love her.
I
her.
love Gina. Yeah, I love Gina. She was in
Yeah,
Ottawa
she's
a few
great.
years ago. What's that?
I
Really?
can't see anybody anymore. Oh,
Oh,
okay.
really? Do you want to log out and log back in?
No, I think I've just pressed something that I shouldn't have.
Did you press, let me see, could it be the view, speaker view,
It doesn't, but it's gonna auto.
top right hand corner, the little box up there? You click.
Oh, okay, maybe.
Okay.
It doesn't matter. I can see you now, but I have to see myself. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So Lola, Lady, ask your question, please.
So anyways, I just thank you for your book. So I have a review, but somebody challenged me to write a 300-word review. I'm working on it.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a professor friend of literary studies in Brussels, and I shared my review with him, and he said, oh, can you make it a real review so I can publish it in my magazine?
Oh, wow.
So I said, what's a real review? He said 200 to 300 words. I'm like, oh my gosh. So anyways, I'm working on that. When I have it, I'll tag you on Instagram.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Thank you. So I wanted to add to Louisa. So, you know, when we talk about ghetto names, sometimes, I mean, there's a whole history behind that.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, it's an evolution of people trying to walk away from their slave owner given names. And in doing so, people became creative and excessively everything. So when you see people using like Keisha, whatever, it's a lot, and we should respect them, right? That's number one. And then number two, a few years ago, I applied for a job here in Ottawa, same resume, everything, and I put my name, Fatima Alao. I got a call back like a few minutes after. And then when I called, oh, did you apply for the job in the kitchen? I said, no, I applied for a job as the executive director. Oh, okay,
Oh, wow.
we'll call you back. I never got that call back. So what I did, you notice I used Lala and Laide a lot. That's what prompted that. So what I did, I used the same resume and changed my name to Lala. And I got the job in 6 weeks.
Right.
Same job. Yeah, right in this Ottawa in 2019. So, I mean, it is what it is. There's a lot behind our names, as evidenced also by Dikembe and Celestine. It always seems like when we take on a name or decide to leave a name behind, it comes with leaving some things and assuming another identity. So all of us. Yeah. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that, especially making that change. I mean, I've listened a lot. I rather listen than talk. I've listened a lot, and you've answered most of my questions, especially regarding sexuality. but I just wanted to know what are your thoughts on from the moment Dikembe stopped being Dikembe and became Celestine? Because that seems to be the beginning of his struggle, right? Stripping his identity. That seems to be, if you're changing my name, it almost seems like I'm never going back to where I come from. So what was your motivation to, I mean, it's obvious, but I just want to know how you arrived at, okay, let's take away his name. Why didn't Dikembe just be a nickname? Like change it to a nickname, like whatever. Why did he just, let's strip him of that Dikembe and give him totally something else?
I think because I think I mentioned it earlier, because it's the most powerful way of owning someone. If you think about, and I said I wrote it with the spirit of Roots, that scene where he's whipping Toby and saying, you're Toby, and he's like, no, I'm Kunta Kinte. That was powerful for me, that scene. So when I was writing that scene in the school where he was saying that's his name, it was important because then it's the final ownership. They got Dikembe from Africa and brought him to England and they kind of owned him that way, but that's not enough. You've got to get the soul and the spirit of that person. And I feel the way they could do that to this child, because this child has got limited experience, the only way then to do it, you've stripped it from his family, now you must take his name. Because as we spoke about before, the name is not just a name, it's where we want this child to go in life. If you, especially with this particular tribe, it tells you the tribe he comes from, the region of the Congo it comes from, the food he would have eaten, the dialect, everything about who he is in that name. So if they've stripped that from him, then mission is accomplished.
Correct.
And he knew that. He knew that. And that scene, it's on page 172 in the book where he's in the school and he's struggling. And at the end of that scene, he says that it's becoming very easy to say this new name. And again, that's another source of shame for him.
It is.
It's on page 172, I think. Yeah.
Yes, correct. Correct.
Yeah. It literally says start with your name at the top. Start with your name. So that scene, I think, is pivotal at that point. At that point, he's been in England almost a year. So he's still holding on for as long as he can. But at that point, he's like, yeah, there's an audience of people. So it's very important. I'm really glad you brought up the name about the African Americans, things like Shaniqua and so forth, because I feel that in a way, as you said, it's moving away from the slave master names and forging their own identity. I don't want to speak for African Americans, I'm not one, but it's just a feeling I get where maybe they want to be as African as they can, even knowing they've not been to Africa. So there's these names that are molded just for them. And I think it's important. It's just for them. It's not the slave master. It's not the African name. It's just for them. And I think that's the feeling I get for that. And again, I don't want to speak for African Americans, but I feel that's the feeling I get from that. Really.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Taking back their identity. Yeah.
So Laura, I just felt that, you see, when I got to Laura, I went, okay, in the beginning, yeah, I know that she went through so much abuse and I don't know, childhood trauma, but I don't know, maybe it's the Nigerian in me. You know how they say sometimes that, yeah, it's happened, let it go, move on with life. So I just didn't talk to me about that character. Like why was
okay.
she just had, I don't know, there was just something about that character. She wasn't my favorite.
Okay. I'll be brief because I have to leave at 1:15. With Laura, maybe because Dikembe was so strong, maybe he's just your favorite, and that's okay. And maybe you didn't have time to give her any more of your energy. And that's okay. With her, I think with trauma, none of us have the right to say that, get over it. She was locked in an attic. She was abused. Her mother's gone. Her father, he went on honeymoon and never returned. That alone is a trauma. That alone is a trauma. Her dad, and who is this woman? This woman is an abuser. She was her tutor, who was all nicey to her while her father was alive, suddenly starts drugging her. I don't know if you picked that up. I was quite subtle about it. She drugged her in the beginning. So she was quite woozy. So she was drugging her, putting her in this attic, not feeding her, making her pee into a bucket. But when the social services would come, she would pretend. So this child has gone through extreme trauma, and we all deal with trauma in different ways. Some people they cover it up and they get on with it, but I kid you not, one day it will come out and it won't be pretty. Or some people they kind of enclose in themselves and they keep themselves to themselves, which she did. She had no friends. She had that one annoying co-worker that just wouldn't leave her alone. She had one boyfriend that she didn't really, get with. So she was quite an insular character, but she's really important because I wanted to show the difference between these two children. One's black, one's white. They're both locked in the same attic, but I wanted to see Cinderella, always. Evil stepmother's always intentional. But I wanted to show the difference, and it's very subtle differences. For example, with Laura, she passes as white, right? So the way she's treated in the mental health system is going to be different. If you notice, she got counselling. Yes. Dr. Raj was almost her saviour. In England, you are 20 times probably less likely to get counselling if you're a black person. If you're a black man, forget it. You're going to get drugged up if you're a black person. But if you're a white person, you will be more likely to be offered a talking therapy, because again, it's that beast mentality, this inhuman mentality. Let's just drug them up. Let's put them in. So I wanted to show that she got the best of treatment in a way, but she had almost a horrific start as Dikembe, because every trauma is different. Just because she wasn't brought over from Africa doesn't mean that she wasn't traumatized. It's just different ways of traumatizing a child, but she got better treatment for sure. Because if Dikembe was born in the modern day era, he would have stood no chance, to be honest, no chance. So her story was important in that aspect.
Okay, all right. Anyway, because you said you need to leave at 15:15, please, let's quickly take our picture. And then I also want to say that, please. Okay, let's see. 3, is everybody ready? Okay, let me take another one. Okay. Okay, thank you so much. I like the fact that when he was talking to, so I'm just gonna jump to the end because there's so much to discuss here, but look, we only have Lola for what, an hour. I like when Dikembe said to Laura, said to them that when he passes on, he should be taken back home. Because I thought he was gonna find his way back home, you know? Yeah, he said, it just took me back to how we are in Nigeria. And when a Nigerian passes away, a parent, they will always tell you that, you know what, no matter what you take, you have to take the person back home.
Yes.
Yeah. Where my dad is from, you take the man back home, you take a woman back to her own father's place. Yes, the importance of home to us, the definition of home, the importance of, it goes down to being buried, in the soil.
Absolutely, you're so right. And also, Dikembe not knowing much about his culture wouldn't have known that. But all he wants to do is go back home. That's all he's ever wanted. And there was a little touch there. Ndugu Mahali, who died at 12, he actually died in that stretch of water in real life. Yeah, in real life, in the Congo. And they called it Kalulu Halls after him. Kalulu Falls, I should say. So so he died there. So I wanted to make it seem that Dikembe's ashes were put there. That made the story come together for me. These children, it came together. But absolutely, all he wanted was to go home. That was his dream, and he did. He did.
Anyway, Lola, I just want to say a big thank you. I wish we had you for longer. We're gonna have you back here. See,
we can definitely keep you for much longer than that.
Yes, and I just hope that you have a longer time to spend with us, because look, you started it. You shouldn't have written such a book. Yeah, you have written a short book, so we could just talk about it.
Louisa, we'll make her read one of our books, and we invite her to come on and join the discussion.
Okay, yeah, that's true. I think I will send it to her. I'll just send her an invite. Hey, join us for this book. Yeah, I just want to have time. But yeah, you wrote this book. You should have written a short book so we could talk about it in 30 minutes. Now it's your fault.
It's my fault. It's
Yeah,
my fault.
So I just want to say a very, very big thank you, Lola. You know, like I said, we've been following each other for years, you understand? And it's
Yes, we have.
We're just talking now.
And I've got other books as well.
Okay, so we will still bring you back here. Yeah, we really, really enjoyed this talk, you know, and we'll find a way to put everything into, 1 hour. Yeah. So thank you so much, have a great day. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
All
Thanks
right.
for having me.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.